Mayor, you can start. Mayor, you can start.
Okay, now I'm good. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. We'll get started. Thank you all for being on here. I'm going to call this meeting to order with a roll call real quick. Commissioner Byrne, Commissioner Gay,
Here.
Commissioner Sheffer,
Here.
Commissioner Szymanski,
Present.
Commissioner Schlosser,
Here.
Commissioner Coluzzi.
Here.
Okay, everyone is here. Just a couple things. We do have, let's see, 8 people from the public have signed up to speak, and we'll get into those after our discussion. What I'd like to do is just go over what the governor said today on the mayor's call this morning, and he reiterated a little bit further on his press conference this afternoon. And then I'm going to turn it over to the city manager and her staff to talk about the city and kind of the state of the city, and then move into the discussion with the commissioners themselves. First off, as you all know, a week or so ago, the governor decided to hold up on moving into phase 3 because of a couple of outbreaks in Dewey Beach from Senior Week. Subsequent to that, there's been a lot of testing in the last week or so, mainly through the restaurant community, as well as a number of different stops here in Sussex County that have turned out to have a lot of positive cases, as I know everybody saw. I think last Thursday they did a little over 1,000 tests, and I believe about 102 were positive. And they did that out at Epworth, and I think it was around a 9% rate. Just informationally, up until this massive testing that's been done in Sussex in the last week or so, the state's rate was about a little bit less than 4% of positive cases based upon how many were tested. The 9% happened with the Epworth. They've done about 5,000 tests in the last 2 days. 3,500 were tested yesterday. And then there's some off-site places that were done yesterday and today. And they don't have those results yet. The good news is, from the state's perspective, as they're looking at metrics, the metrics that he's been looking at all along are pretty positive. The death rate hasn't changed in the last 5 or 6 days. The hospitalization rate, which was at the peak 337 people hospitalized back in April, today is now at 64. That has moved in the last few days down. It had jumped up to about 90 from 78, and then 74, 76, whatever, and now it's at 64. What they're seeing with all this testing, it's down here in the Rehoboth zip code, if you will. They're doing some more up around Lewis and other places. And what's happening is the average age of the positive tests has dropped substantially. I think last week the average age may have been in the state somewhere in the neighborhood of 40, 45. The average age of the positive tests in the last few days between 18 and 25. And so it points directly to students that are here working, younger people that are here working, going to parties, working in restaurants, visiting people here at the beach, which typically happens in the summertime. And that's very concerning to the governor. And again, they'll continue to do more tests. They've got more tests scheduled today, tomorrow, and Thursday down here, Epworth. Various different restaurants have testing. Many of the restaurants have closed for cleaning or because they don't have enough staff because they're testing positive. Basically, the governor has mentioned we need to, as a local authority, push further and further with the opportunity for people to wear masks, enforcement of the boardwalk, stopping people providing masks as much as possible. And he's suggested that across the state. Now, the Department of Health is now getting very stringent in the way they're going to enforce things around the state. The director talked about actual inspections of restaurants, inspections of retail shops, fines, law enforcement, closures, removal of licenses, and stepping up their enforcement across the board. And, you know, the one thing they don't want to do is revert back to stage or phase one, which is happening in many states. Many other states are very troubling with the number of cases that are positive. It's troubling here in Delaware as well, but the metrics the governor is following is not that negative from his perspective. So what he has said is he is going to stay in phase two here, definitely in Sussex County, but in the state for the indefinite future. He does not have any plans on phase three until things can be addressed as far as more testing goes. They're going to continue to do more testing. He has suggested that here in the beach areas that bars revert back to phase one. What that means is restaurants that have bars, you can no longer sit at the bars. You can be at a table at the bar area, but you cannot sit at the bar or be standing in the bar area. The bartenders can still work. So that will be put into place on the, I believe it's the 3rd, will be his edict on that. One of the things he's mentioned is there's an awful lot of non-compliance. We've seen that here in Rehoboth, obviously. That's where a number of the correspondence that we've received for this meeting, as well as I think some of the public speakers, will be addressing the non-compliance of masks, social distancing. The governor continues to push upon us, and we need to push upon our neighbors, our friends, people that we see that wear the mask in public places. If you can't socially distance, wear the masks on the boardwalk as much as possible. With that, that's, again, the governor just keeps pushing towards testing, extensive testing, contact tracing, pointing out to everybody to follow guidance. And this is throughout the state, but specifically in the beach area here, because again, what's happened is a lot of these young people kind of throw caution to the wind, and again, they're not being hospitalized with their infections, but they're carrying it, and some of them live here with their vulnerable parents or grandparents, and that could be a problem. Right now, that problem has not popped up, but the governor's going to look at it over the next couple of weeks to see what happens. So with that, I will turn it over to the city manager to provide her information about the city itself. Yep. I think we just lost her.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, commissioners, and all who are attending this meeting. Just wanted to provide some numbers first, and numbers regarding revenue and any decreased revenue we've seen to date. Today is June 30th, so I can give you parking numbers up to and including June 28th, June 29 and 30 are not in this total, but as far as parking permits for the month of June, we have 2020 sales in the amount of $308,155, and the same for parking revenue up to including June 28, 2020. We have total sales of $784,354. That does not include coins. We haven't had them counted up to date. So they are the numbers. That gives us a generalized decreased revenue figure of approximately, including when we started it last week of May through June, approximately $385,000. I will, before I pass this on to staff, including Chief Banks, Dennis, Jenny, Kevin Williams, if you want to hear anything from Kevin, I think we can say that the barricades have been, working as best they can. We haven't, since we've removed the bulk of them after your last meeting. Everything seems to be orderly, at least with the restaurants. The outdoor restaurants, as Dennis will tell you, the outdoor seating is doing well. People are in compliance as far as sitting there and dining. I can't say that's the same for the folks that are walking by them, but the retail and the restaurant businesses, at least at this point, that are outside, have been taken outdoors, are doing okay. We have had about 22 businesses that were determined to be in violation as far as not customers not wearing masks, employees not wearing masks, not having any hand sanitizer. Dennis will go into this a little more, but between Dennis and Chief Banks, they did an extensive search of the businesses, the business area, and have come up with certain establishments that are just not in compliance for one reason or another. It's distressful. It's very aggravating for the staff to have to deal with this. People are abusive, and we'll get into more of that. But we're dealing with it, and as best we can. I think there's some, since the governor's call today and his call for much more enforcement, Chief Banks will give you an update of what his ideas are for the coming weekend. So with that, Dennis, can you just speak a bit to the commissioners, please?
Good afternoon. So since our last meeting, as far as restaurants go, we've had 3 new applications and approvals for outdoor seating. And I did have one come in just a bit ago that should be in process tomorrow. It's not a huge jump. And as Sharon mentioned, I spent time last Friday afternoon and last Saturday evening visiting the businesses and restaurants, and I have visited everyone in town, and there's a couple businesses that are constant with the violations with not wearing masks, and a lot of what I did find with customers that weren't wearing masks, it was one of those, oops, I'm sorry, they just didn't realize they didn't pull their mask up. You know, they got them on, got them in their hands, but they're just forgetful, I guess to say the least. What bothers me the most is the employees who don't wear them. Whenever I find a violation, I educate them on it. They pretty much correct it there on the spot. There's a couple incidents where in some of these bigger stores, and there's a lot more people in it, the employee in the back of the room does not see the customer coming in, without the masks. So it's not blatant, but I will say there is a couple businesses that are more in violation more often than not. I continue to, when I'm out and about, to poke my head in these businesses and restaurants to see what's going on, and if I find anything, I again reiterate what the rules are. That's what I've got.
Thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Hey, Dennis, have you given any fines or can you give fines? What's the process there?
So as far as a code enforcement officer, no, I don't have the authority to do so. That process would be involving the police department, and then, and the chief will correct me if I'm wrong, but we would need then go to the state to apply for a cease and desist order if they're to continue not to comply.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, have we done any cease and desist?
So I'm going to ask Chief Banks now to just answer that question, Commissioner,
Okay.
and
Thank you.
also go over some of the issues that the police have been facing and staffing levels and a plan for this weekend.
Thank you. Yes, to answer the question, we have done some stop and cease orders and all. It does go through the Attorney General's office, and then DEMA gives us a paper. And the first part is we tell them verbally, and then we go and apply for this. So it's almost like a warrant. And then it's typed up, it's sent to us, and we have to go and deliver it to the business and all. And the reality is they do that a couple of times to try to get compliance on its own. So there's no fines right away. There's a process. So it's repeat going back before something's done. Now, the governor has talked more recently about that maybe that's going to be stepped up and actually start fining some businesses. But as far as I know, that a lot of businesses throughout the state have not been fined, and that's the same here. But we have actually served people with those paperwork.
Chief, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Just to mention to everybody, on the afternoon conference or press release or press conference with the governor, the director of Delaware Public Health did come on, and they are stepping up their enforcement pretty substantially, and will be working with local law enforcement. But I think they're going to be, especially down around this community, going to be patrolling around and, as I said, performing inspections, giving out fines, getting involved with law enforcement, maybe closures, maybe in some cases reverting back to phase one if it's something like a restaurant or a retail shop that is not following the rules. Thank you, Chief. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. I believe the city manager wanted me to kind of go into what's been going on, and obviously I know you as the mayor and commissioners have been contacted about lack of enforcement and things like that. Let me just start off by, there was a question, some comments, several about the signboard at 101A. DelDOT provided that sign to us, and it has been down for about a week or a little bit longer, but as of this afternoon, it should be up and working again. I have not personally gone out there, but an officer went out there earlier and said he got it back up working. So hopefully that's a help to us. And I'd just like to go back and just talk about social distancing. Remember, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, it's prolonged exposure, 7 to 10 minutes. And then if I could just talk about the staffing levels and what we're doing as far as to try to help with enforcement. A normal summer season, we'll hire 26 cadets. This year we got 22, a little bit lower only because of the pandemic. We were not able to get the applications, and people were not able to get here for the interviews and the different testing process, even though we did a lot of it online. Currently though, because of different factors, we only have 16 officers left. 3 of the officers, seasonal cadets, have gone ahead and resigned because of the pandemic and other issues going on, which I'll talk about. And of course, one, we had separated this past weekend with, and then we have one officer that, went out today with, COVID, exposure. So, we're down to 16 for, summer season. To date, we have handed out over 12,500 masks on the boardwalk, and yesterday we picked up another 5,000 masks so we can hand out. I'm sure those will be gone by the end of this weekend because we ran out early Saturday afternoon. 2 weeks ago, we were tasked to hand out masks around individuals standing in food lines. We started doing that. Of course, if you do one thing, some other issues come up, and some of the issues around there have been with the DART running again, DART buses and Jolly Trolley this past week opening back up. When we start pulling the resources at the boardwalk over, we've been getting calls from DART agencies and Jolly and things about people, the cars are parked in their way or delivery vehicles up there. So it's hard for us to walk away. We're seeing we need to be up there and assisting mass transient more often. This is really important for everyone to hear and understand. Responding to COVID-19 is only a part of the job requirements of the police department and the cadets. That as such, the cadets have to handle traffic, parking, medical assist, disputes, lost children, special events such as farmers markets, dog tent, smoking, alcohol violations, found and lost property. We help give directions, and the biggest thing I haven't said that they handle is actually the criminal complaints such as shoplifting, thefts, disorderlies, and so on, as the list goes on. So I mentioned this. Why do I say that? Because a lot of times you and I receive complaints about officers, not seeing officers on the boardwalk or not enforcement. And when you have 3 or 4 officers up there on the boardwalk and they get called away to a complaint, that's why it gets reduced. Not making excuses, I'm just trying to be factual and give an understanding for that. Another issue we're seeing up on the boardwalk that I like to talk about out on when trying to make people comply is there's so many people up there at one time, and now we're seeing, especially the last 2 weeks, arguing that they have a medical issue and they're not required to have, they're exempt. They are not by law required to carry a medical card to sit there and say they're exempt from the face mask, because that's not how it reads. It just says that they have a medical condition. So now that is what they're blurting out to the officers daily and many, many times a day. A lot of people are crossing the boardwalk that we're having a problem with, that we're not being able to, we're really not stopping them. We're trying not to if they're just going across the boardwalk onto the beach areas. And a lot of seniors, again, are starting to say they have health issues. Is it true or is it not? It can be up for debate, but as a law enforcement officer, we really can't question it too much because of HIPAA and things like that. And the one biggest thing, and I've been up there every Saturday and Sunday for the last five weeks with the cadet that's working. And one thing I see, as soon as you stop to talk to one person and hand out masks, there's 5 or 10 walking past us behind us and people screaming at us that, hey, there's more that just walked past us. And one thing I can share is that the longer this goes on, the more agitated the public is becoming on both sides of the issues. All you have to look at is the Facebook inquiries. You look at social media accounts and on both sides about that it's not right or why aren't you doing more. So that's getting difficult on these cadets that remember, yes, they have arrest powers, they're police officers, but they're college students, 19, 20, 21 years of age. And a lot of times these are older adults that they're meeting with, and they're meeting with profanity, angry remarks, the refusal to comply, and as soon as one individual walks by, another one comes by and starts yelling at them, well, you're not stopping the other ones on the boardwalk. And so the thing we have to look at is crowds on the beach versus crowds on the boardwalk versus the crowds on the sidewalks about social distancing. So we're asking again 4 officers a shift to be able to own all 3 of those phases, which is the reality is near impossible and handle other complaints. Again, not making excuses, just bring it to everyone's attention. So what can we do to try to combat people's fears that we're not doing any enforcement? I think this is where it's going to get into you, Mayor, and commissioners to think about if you're okay with some kind of checkpoints on the boardwalk where we can funnel people into one area. Of course, it slows people going back and forth. And when we see people putting a mask up on it because they see law enforcement officers, because that's the next thing we see every day is as they're approaching us, they put their mask up or they send their hands, they put it on. But as soon as they walk, you can just stare at them and see that they then pull it right back down as soon as they pass an officer or a cadet in this case. So yes, we do a checkpoint that goes all the way across the boardwalk in different areas that's fair to everybody. So you're not just singling one group out versus another, everybody, and you have spotters looking ahead if they have them on or not and give citations. Now, realize that's going to be unpopular, I would believe, or get a lot of, maybe praised a lot of places in many ways too, but it's going to definitely bring the media to us. So something for you to think about. But that's one way I know of trying to be fair and consistent in doing this. So it's just food for thought. And so we can do that. I can bring people in with overtime and bring the resources. So we have, somebody do numbers and counts and all that, the people you have contact. Because if you do something like that, you need to make sure it's done correctly and professionally. And then I think we need to discuss and talk about, are there any limitations we want to do? Because the beach on last Saturday was just really, really full. There is no social distancing. I've been talking to the captain of lifeguards, Kent Buxton. People are trying. I'll give them credit. I was asked hour after hour last week, where can we go to get more space? And that's why Pennsylvania Avenue, the parking lot is filled up down there at North Beach, and we're getting calls about why are so many people down here and parking. And it's only because people are trying to social distance, but I'm sure this week could be the same problem as well as last weekend. It's just we are filled up to capacity. And so it is making it more difficult on compliance. The lifeguards are seeing the same thing, and they're asking, and like I said, many people are asking, where can we go so we can spread out? It's just on some of these busy weekends that you just can't. And so that's where I'm at. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions. The lifeguards are doing a great job trying to monitor that. And but I think if we are going to start doing the true enforcement, as the governor asked this afternoon or this morning on the call, that we have to be fair and consistent, because otherwise it's just you're picking on this group or this few walking by. So.
Chief, you do have a question, Commissioner Gay?
No, I have some general feedback. He can finish first. I don't have a specific one for him right now.
All right, Commissioner
I'm
Schlesser.
sorry, that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just didn't want to interrupt you.
Hey,
But
Chief, how many, I'm sorry, Susan, were you talking? You had your hand up first.
go ahead. I'll go
I
ahead.
just had a couple questions for Chief before any observations, just real quick. How many actually fines have you given out? Citations, I guess.
In citations, we've given out only one true citation. We've given out some written warnings, and quite honestly, we've even stopped that because it's just complete arguing. We tried to do the front end and we hand out the mask, and then we started with some warnings, and it just became the people were standing there just arguing with the officers nonstop and almost talked themselves into a citation. But we didn't want to do that if we were wanting to give warnings. We didn't want to change our philosophy because of their attitude or demeanor. But and that does worry me. If we start doing a checkpoint or we start doing enforcement, I want everybody to understand with the individual, not everybody, some of them are very thankful and thank us every day out there. So I don't want to paint everybody in the same picture here, but a lot of people are going to fight us. So it will probably end from giving a civil citation into a full-blown criminal arrest, as we had to, with one incident, we did end up getting a civil citation But I mean, he was in handcuffs at the time because he was disorderly and all that, and finally calmed down, and we were able to just give him a civil citation because he wouldn't even give us his name or anything like that. And that's going to court. He's actually got an attorney and taking that to court. So that'd be long-winded. So it's only one citation, several warnings, and like I said, over 12,000 masks have been handed out, and that's kind of the route we're trying to take. But it's not working. People are not getting. I've talked to people and say, oh, I want a beach and sidewalk. You don't have to. That makes no sense. Why the boardwalk? And I didn't realize it. And they'll be standing next to a sign on the boardwalk saying you have to wear the mask on the boardwalk. So.
Are you doing any social distancing enforcement or, on Rehoboth or anywhere else? Or is that just simply, you're just focusing kind of on the boardwalk?
When the officers are assigned boardwalk, so on the way to and from, when they're walking, they'll make comments to people. And again, that actually is even worse than the boardwalk as far as how we get treated. I know myself, I'll walk down the street as police chief and ask people about wearing a mask because you can't social distance, or even standing in line at a restaurant trying to get some fries or ice cream, and the profanity that comes out of their mouth just to me or whatever, saying if they wanted a mask and I'll offer them a mask, then they would have brought one or wear one. So we're seeing that. I guess to answer your question, we are verbally is going through them. We haven't tried any checkpoints or anything. People have really just drawn a line in the sand. The ones that want to wear a mask, think it's the right thing to do, are doing that. And they thank us for being out there. They thank us for doing it. The ones that don't want to, they're drawing a line in the sand. And that's what I was saying. As longer this goes on, that's what we're seeing. And we're more than happy to enforce the law on the boardwalk. But we're to the point, everybody has to know what the next step is, because just us asking them is not happening.
Right.
A lot of times people are on the beach and they have it back at their beach on their couch, but they run up to the restrooms and forget to bring it. So we offer them a mask. But that's what they keep telling us, is back at on the beach. And I do believe them. I don't want to sit there and say, hey, that's not believable, because a lot of them are nice enough after they come back the next time and see me and say, see here, I had my mask, and thank them for showing us and all that. They just forget it. They're in a hurry, been in the water, or they don't have pockets on their bathing suit while running up to the restroom and just forget to put it on. So,
Thanks, Chief.
Commissioner Gay?
First of all, from everything I've learned in the last, couple of weeks, it really seems like the place we're at is that the combination of masks and testing, it has to be both, and it's the combination that's going to prevent us from having to go backwards. So I am very pleased. In fact, I want to back up a step and ask a couple of questions about the testing, because I feel like most of our discussion today is going to be about enforcement and masks. So I just want to bring that out, that I do think it's very important, and it's wonderful that that there are as many testing sites as there are now in the state. My understanding is there's going to be something set up weekly, and that basically everyone visiting the area in the last 2 weeks is encouraged to be tested. So one question I had is today, and Mayor, you mentioned the press conference, and I tried to listen to most of it, and he was talking about the percentage of positive tests in Rehoboth, and as you said, about 9.5% and nearly 15% in Dewey. And of course, the average age has gone down. But I thought I heard them say that percentage of the tests are just for Delaware residents. Is that right?
That's just that percentage, 9% or so, is just the tests that were done this past week.
Right, but only of Delaware residents, I thought I heard them say.
Yes.
And so one of my questions is are the testing sites open to everyone? In other words, are we able to tell our out-of-state homeowners that you can get tested in Delaware? Is that allowed?
So, for the longest time, they were doing testing basically based upon symptomatic conditions.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, because of this outbreak at restaurants down here, they're basically just getting everybody. And so out-of-state people, I'm not 100% sure if they show their license, they'll say no to them. They're trying to get as many people tested as possible.
Okay,
Obviously, they'd like to have the people in Delaware tested as much as possible. In their test, what he did say is a number of the tests are done with zip codes of upstate. So people that are down here visiting or staying in their house and maybe working for the summer. It's not just the local zip code of people living here. It is an awful lot from all over the state.
yeah, okay. And then, you know,
I'm
the other-
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I was just going to mention tomorrow at the Rehoboth Elementary School, that's Wednesday, July 1st, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We are, BB Hospital is hosting
Right.
a drive-through tomorrow, and you do not need to sign up for that. And when I spoke to BB Hospital, because we'll have a couple officers out there tomorrow assisting, that they did not mention any restrictions. So I would say
Right.
out of state and Delaware spot.
Okay, so anybody's encouraged to go. And there's another one Thursday
Yes.
mentioned at the church as well.
Yeah.
You do not have to sign up in advance.
Right, right. I mean, I do think it's critical to note that, you know, that a lot of the ones that are testing positive are completely asymptomatic. And we got a note from one of our pieces of correspondence today from a medical student who reminded us of the data that shows that the viral load is actually the highest when someone is pre-symptomatic. And so, you know, it just makes it all that much more critical, not only, you know, for testing, but for compliance. And you know, I think what we struggle with here is that the purpose of the enforcement is not to be punitive. It's just to protect everyone, you know, by offering masks. And I think it's great that you all have given out as many as you have. I hope there's an unlimited supply available to you, because I think you're going to be ending up ordering, you know, 5,000 every few days or something. But you know, I think it is important for health reasons. I also wonder in terms of enforcement, and we're going to, I think as a group, get to that. I was encouraged today on the governor's call for the Department of Public Health to specifically say they're stepping up their enforcement. And Mayor, you named a number of the things they're doing: fines, closure, referring to law enforcement. And I guess I wonder if you know, we can sort of double team with them. In other words, if we can let them deal with the stores, you know, any establishments where there are issues, and we can focus on our visitors or whatever. It just seems like it's going to take everyone's efforts.
Yeah, and one of the things that they did say, as is happening already, is if people see something, say something
Right.
To the state, to the Department of Health, because they're basically asking people to call them up and report people.
Yep.
Because it's so important.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner Cluzy.
Yes, thank you. In the same vein about the health department, so can you tell me, Chief, can the health department actually give out fines? Do they, or they have to go through you? I'm just trying to understand how that process works.
I'm not sure of how it's been working so far, and that's not to say that somebody can't later on from the Attorney General's office or whoever, but how it's been working so far is complaints that come into the AG's office or to the health service, and they have a centralized person that then will call us through state police, and they reach out to us and say, can you go check on this business where we're receiving complaints? We go down there and talk to the business, and if we see non-compliance, we have to then report that back, and they'll go ahead and do an assist order and send that back to us for us to, so we'll print it out and deliver that. So as it's working right now, we are still involved in it, and that's the other thing taken away from the officers, because we're coming back and doing it. So even though they're encouraging people, as we do, to either report it to us or right to the health, and they've got the data bank to keep track of it, so it is good that it's being reported to them directly. They reverted back as of now to us to go back and enforce it. And
Well, I think
eventually we would be the ones to do the warrants and all that for them and serve it.
So given that we're pretty busy, that your team is pretty busy, it seems to me we need to find out pretty immediately, if we can, if the health department is going to send people down here, that we need to know whether they can do that. It's pretty much what Commissioner Gay said, if we could sort of divide and conquer here, then they could deal with the businesses, and then our police force can deal with the visitors. That would probably be, a better situation. So that's something I would really like to know pretty quickly. So this idea, and communication, by the way, I think is really key right now. We need to let the businesses know that the health department's coming. They could face large fines. They could face closure. They could face losing their license. I think that information needs to get out immediately, because that ought to, on its own, get some compliance moving forward, I would hope. So that's something I think that we need to do. I'd like to see that happen. And then as far as the idea of checkpoints, I think that your suggestion is a good one, and it sounds like you already have in mind how this might happen. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. But I also, again, communication here is we need to let visitors know clearly, and I believe that we need to, masks should be required in the commercial area, required in the commercial area as well as on the boardwalk. I understand not necessarily on the beach, but I would think that if you're walking, if you're moving around, if you're not either A, in the water, or B, lying on your blanket, your beach towel, then you should be wearing a mask if you're walking around. So that's kind of one thought I have on that. But I think that we have to get to the point of, because this has gotten really serious, we're going to be heading backwards. I mean, I'm already looking at the facts nationwide, and it looks really terrible. It's no warning. They're going to be fine. People need to know. And I mean, this is my idea or my suggestion, but I think we're in a situation now. It's posted signs saying there'll be no warning. No mask, you'll get a fine of however much money we decide we think is worthwhile. And I know that it's going to be problematic for the police force, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of irate people. But if we give them plenty of notice, I think that's really just about the only thing we can do to enforce this. I don't know what other people think, but that's...
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I do too.
I agree.
Commissioner Szymanski.
Thank you, Mayor. I completely agree with Commissioner Cluzy. We need to, communication is key for the businesses. They need to know that the Department of Health is coming, that there's going to be consequences. Not only will they be consequences, but I mean, we could end up going backwards, which is only going to hurt all of the businesses as well. So that needs to be clear. In terms of, there needs to be signage that if you're not wearing the mask, and Rehoboth Avenue needs to be included, that there are penalties, there are fines, and we need to have, a few times all hands on deck and start writing some tickets. And I don't appreciate, I do appreciate the position that the police are in, and people are being mean and belligerent, and I don't envy the city staff or police at all. This is a terrible situation, but I think we need to set a tone where we do issue some fines and people start taking it seriously. And we need signage out there that says, there are penalties if you're not adhering to the rules. We've got a duty to the health and safety of our businesses, our visitors, our residents, that we need to take this seriously. And Chief, I'd like to just ask a couple questions. And one, I'll ask two questions, and I'll just let you answer them. One, we were already short-staffed to begin with. Now you've dropped some additional people. Do you feel like you need to, or is there even a possibility for you to hire some new cadets for the rest of the season? Keeping in mind that I think, I'll just leave that question there. And then also the lifeguard situation, we were already short-staffed with lifeguards, and now I think we've got some of them that are going out because they will need to quarantine as well, just like you've had with some of your officers. What's the plan there? Are we going to hire more lifeguards? Are we going to shut beaches down if we don't have enough of them? So I just leave you with those two questions.
It's good questions. As far as the police staffing, it would have been great to have more, but like I said, with the pandemic, the applications just didn't come in. We actually did better than some of our local beach communities. For example, my understanding in Dewey Beach, they usually have 30-some seasonals, and they only hired 12. With the Ocean City, we understand they're like 40% below their normal. Just not getting applications because of COVID, as well as just people not interested in getting law enforcement. We're seeing that throughout the country and all at this time. But they have to have certain training for COPT to have any type of powers, even do a civil citation and all that in training. So that's minimum of 6 weekends of training with 12-hour days. So it would be near impossible to get them in there. Their psychologicals, physicals, and things that has to be done to get them legally allowed to. So I think we're at where we're at. Again, and the 3 that left us was their own choice. There just wasn't what they thought it was going to be, and some of the anxiety they were getting for coming to work. Again, these are young kids, and a lot of them are living with their parents still, and college students, and they're just concerned about the COVID, and they see the same thing we do, that things are going up, and they're around a lot of people, and the parents are just concerned for their safety, and just asked them to go ahead and resign. So I think for the police, we're where we're at. With lifeguards, we did have some applications waiting. We did reduce it down to 55. We're making out fine. We don't have shutting beaches down at this time, and we don't foresee that happening. Some that have had to leave because of military and other obligations, as soon as they leave, we've been able to backfill them within a couple of days after we get some of the physical standards and the medical stuff out of the way. So I don't see that as an issue, but with people with the 8 lifeguards recently that are out, I'm going to talk to city managers afternoon. I have talked to Captain Buxton with the lifeguards, and it's just going to be readjusting some of their schedules. So we might run into a little bit of overtime to keep that up. But right now we do have the personnel. It's just they might not get 2 days off a week. Maybe it's just 1 day a week until the other ones come back. So I think we're good for right now.
I guess if we end up having more than, more people go out than the 8, I guess, is there any contingency plan if more people go out? We might be able to skim by losing 8 at the moment, but we could it could go in the opposite direction, and then more people going out instead of them coming back.
Yes, we do. The problem we'll get into, and we have had some that live out of state and just get in here with housing and all. And the problem with most lifeguards that are out of state, they live together, and that's what happened to get this pandemic. So we might not have the housing for them for where they can stay. That's usually the biggest obstacle with a seasonal employment. If it'd be public works, police department, lifeguards, is always the housing and where they usually live together. So it's not necessarily getting numbers, it's getting them a place to stay in order for them to start working. Because we do, Kent Buxton does a good job and has a lot of returning officers, lifeguards each year. And also he's got some resources, and I spoke to him today about it and yesterday. So as soon as one's gone out, like I said, we've been able to make phone calls and bring others on relatively quickly. It's really just if they're not locals, where can they stay? So we do have a contingency plan, but there are some issues because of we're a beach resort and things are expensive for housing, just like with any other retail business downtown.
Right. Well, thank you, Chief. And Sharon, thank you, and all of your staff that are in the front lines dealing with some of these unpleasant behavior. None of us envy your jobs.
Yeah, right.
Commissioner Byrne.
Yeah, I certainly echo the comments that my commissioner colleagues have made so far. both about great appreciation for what our police are doing and what they're up against and what the city manager and her team are up against. A huge, huge challenge, but one that we have to face, one that we have to provide leadership for. So to the enforcement question from the state that we've talked about some, within the Department of Public Health, there's a section called Health Systems Protection. Health Systems Protection, and that is the group that, as I understand it, what I've talked with folks at the state and I've read, are the ones that will be working in partnership with the Division of Small Business to come into communities like ours and do the actual enforcement, and hopefully working like some of you have said, in a tag team way with the local police department. They are providing very publicly a website and a phone number for people to call in complaints and report, whether it's individuals, groups, or businesses or restaurants. And all complaints are totally anonymous because that's one of the concerns. I've had some residents come in and say, well, they're very reluctant to talk about publicly to the police because of what's going on down the block. And it is totally anonymous. I think we do have to step up enforcement. We need to become much better in terms of being consistent in the language that we use. I think earlier today, city manager gave us some information about that signage is coming, that masks will be required. And so I'd like to hear more about that. And one of the concerns so far, because I hear this all the time, is that people are saying, well, what does it mean? Masks required in public places, it says in some places. In other places, it says masks required when social distancing is not possible. Well, of course, that becomes very vague, and anyone that wants to argue, can argue about social distancing and all of that. We need a very good definition of what masks in public places means. We need to be very, very clear so there's not room for argument on that. And right now, even, I've had people argue with me about even the words masks recommended. Some of the signs say masks suggested. Now, I think that's the same thing, but there are people out there that will even argue about that. And so the consistency of language, I think, is really, really critical. And I agree that we as a community are at a tipping point, and we don't want to tip backwards. We've got to go forward. We've got to support our residents and our businesses. And that means, if it means beefing up enforcement, I think it does. If it goes back to the questions that Edward was just asking about, are there contingency plans to fill in for lifeguards, for police, and we need to support them budget-wise and so on in doing that. Thank you.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Yeah, I applaud the other commissioners for the great suggestions they made. I think what I'd like to focus on is the fact that I think we have universal agreement that we need to support Chief Banks and Sharon Lynn as our city manager and what we need to do as far as communication and enforcement. And I think one of the key things that Chief Banks said that we need to not miss here is that while the focus is on trying to do this in a polite, respectful way, and our law enforcement officers will continue to be polite and respectful, but this is going to escalate, and we know it will, and so I am in full support of what Chief Banks suggests is what he's going to need from us to help him effectively manage this and mitigate the issues from escalating. So I thank you, Chief Banks. Thank you, Sharon Lynn, and I fully support what you tell us you need to do what we're asking you to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Schlosser, if you can hold on for a second. Chief, I have to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
I know people have suggested maybe doing the things on the boardwalk that you suggested, maybe having a stopping point to check people, give them masks, whatever. Also, that people are talking about making masks mandatory in the commercial district. And I tend to agree with all of this, but how does that work with your resources? I mean, obviously you've said that you're down to 16, 4 different shifts. So you've got 4 cadets. The other police officers are pretty much so moving around town, responding to other events. Is that something that you can work with?
The reality is no, because the boardwalk's going to be the main one. If it gets that's mandatory on the sidewalks, commercial district, obviously when we see somebody without that, we can stop while they're going to their assignments and give a citation or give a mask out or a warning, whichever we give, but it needs to be consistent if we're going to step up enforcement to do that. But realize the entire time we're writing that one, that 15, 20 people are going to be walking past us that, you're going to single out because the reality is you're going to stop the person that's walking by themselves versus the group of 10 that's walking together without wearing it, because to write that, you'll be standing with that group standing there for 45 minutes and one officer won't be able to contain that safety-wise, and most of them are just going to keep on walking at that point. That's just a reality. So yes, if you say that's what it is, we make every effort, but realize if they're stopping somebody on the sidewalk, that officer's not on the boardwalk. So it's a give and take. It's just being honest. It can't be at 2 places at one time. Again, what we've been fortunate enough to do in past years, and this year is just totally different, is to be able to help DART, be able to help Jolly Trolley, be able to go to these different events, on Saturday if it's Lingo's, with realtors, people coming in and out of there to help traffic on Scarborough Avenue, and all the different places that we try to sit there and go to, or if it's, different pavilions, if there's any issues there that we try to assign an officer to keep, the noise and things down, that we just can't do that now as much, but there's times when we're going to have to. So that's a long-winded answer. The short answer is yes, we'll do our best, but no, it's taking resources off the boardwalk, and that's fine, just as long as we all understand that.
So logistically, it's a bit difficult.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. Actually, your question covered some of my comments, so I appreciate that. But there was an email, and I think it's on the public record as well, from one of our constituents, and he laid out 5 specific things he recommended that be done, and most of them have been addressed. Being face masks, so obviously requiring them in the commercial, particularly on Rehoboth Avenue, first and second block. Enforcing social distancing, as we've been discussing. One thing, and this is really for Edward, I think, to maybe take back to and work with Rehoboth Beach Main Street, just to even see if it's a good idea. But he made the comment that perhaps the businesses could do, or Main Street could work with the businesses to create and sell Rehoboth Beach themed masks and maybe sanitizer. He mentioned that was a practice that New York City's put in place, and it's been pretty successful. So I just wanted to mention that, Edward, as something maybe we could talk with, the chamber as well as Main Street, and see if, if I want to try anything that, we might be able to get to work. That's been a practice that's worked other places. He also recommended, now several other people brought this up, but I just wonder, I know we're always trying to balance, Chief, particularly you and I have talked about this a lot, balance, security and safety with hospitality. I think at this particular time, I'd have to go with, it's more important to focus on the safety and enforcement aspects. So I wonder if we shouldn't be putting something more on the convention center signs, or even other signs at entryways everywhere onto the commercial districts, onto the boardwalk, entranceways that, period, you wear a mask or you will get a citation, like, period. Like, this is like serious. This is what we're doing. Is it going to stop everybody? No, but maybe it'll discourage at least a higher percentage of people if we're better with the communications and more stringent with the communications. Example, again, convention center sign. It has like little teeny statement that says, masks are required, social distancing required. You really have to look and be there when it's up to actually see it. So I just want to reiterate those 5 points that our constituents sent out, and particularly the communication, and maybe doing something a little more positive, to get people to comply more voluntarily, like through Main Street. So thank you.
All right. Commissioner Byrne.
A question for the chief and or the city manager in terms of following up on the mayor's discussion just a moment ago. Given the state of emergency that I think we still have in the state and in the city, there may well be state resources available to supplement for police, to bring in, retirees, to bring in state police that want, extra hours, or that come on loan to us. In other words, law enforcement people that are trained, that know what they're doing, and that can supplement our limited resources in order to do this additional work. Is there anything there that could be followed up on and appealed to the governor's office?
I can sort of answer that, Mayor, if it's okay. First of all, I just haven't been putting in a lot of overtime. The answer is I can get more officers, the full-time officers up there. Just like, put out the state police, but they have a lot of extra paid jobs too that they have a hard time filling, as well as other towns, because you have to be certified, which they would be. But realize they come at a price. Most extra duty paid jobs for officers, including my officers, because there's collective bargaining agreements, come at 4-hour minimums. Some of them are 2-hour minimums, but most contracts are 4-hour minimum, and they usually start out about $65 to $88 an hour. So that's to have officers, even our officers, on that, as far as if it's a paid job. Now, at time and a half, it's not quite as much as that, but if you brought in other agencies, and that gets a little bit problematic for us under contractual issues with my police department that they have.
Sure.
When you can bring
Thank you.
What
I'm really asking is, are there financial resources available at the state to help us do what really the governor is expecting us to do?
I thought there were.
The answer is yes. We are tracking our overtime. The city is. I did get for last time when we did signage and a little bit of the overtime and things, I was able to secure a grant for $10,000 to help supplement some of that we put the money out front, but they reimburse us. And same thing about some overtime and things for the recent protest. I was able to secure just under $10,000 grant to help offset some of that too. So to answer that, there are some monies out there for that to put up. So that's something else me and city manager have to talk about as far as we did things like this checkpoint or for the extra. Because again, even lining people up at the entrances of the boardwalk, as soon as people are on there, they want to, if they're understanding and they believe in the message that we're all trying to put out there for safety, social distance, they're already doing that for the most part. So it's the ones that don't, as soon as they bypass you, when they take the mask off and walk in their hands, or they're consistently saying it's because they're eating something at the time. So that's the next issue. People are eating pizza and fries and stuff while on the boardwalk, so they had the mask under their chins. So, but to answer your question, yes, there are some monies to do that. It's limited, but we'll always continue to try to find those.
Good to know.
Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, we talk so much about the communications, especially in the business community, in terms of making sure that they're aware of what they risk by not complying, and the enforcement from the Department of Public Health. And we talked about, and I love the idea of the custom masks as well. In fact, I do know of 2 stores in town that are selling decorative masks. I think, and I know at least one of those does custom masks as well. And I know the state has also produced quite a number of nice graphic materials, really good ones, especially about mask wearing and the fact that it protects others. So I guess the bottom line of what I'm wondering is, why shouldn't Main Street take the lead on getting all of this information out to the businesses? There seems to be so much of it, and it seems to be so critical that I think that it really ought to come from Main Street, and perhaps also from the chamber. I know Carol's here, and I would like to hear from her in a minute, because I think her time is limited today if she's still on. But I just feel like went out to Main Street in the beginning and talked to the businesses and got their input, and thus that's what led to the restaurants expanding barriers and all that. And I feel like, well, now's the next stage that they should really be involved.
Thank you. Commissioner Szymanski.
Thanks, Mayor. I completely agree with Commissioner Gay. Main Street is constantly talking to the businesses and sharing communications. They don't have as comprehensive list as the city may have, but agreed. Main Street is, and will continue to do everything they can, as should the chamber. My question goes back to sort of the overtime and other resources that the chief may need. And I guess my question is for the city manager. Under the list that we were keeping of COVID-related expenses to get reimbursed from FEMA, if we had officers, I guess, on overtime duty strictly for the enforcement of masks and social distancing, would those expenses fall under what is allowed under FEMA for reimbursement? Because if it is, I mean, we certainly should be doing it.
I'll say probably, but I can't guarantee that will happen. Our list goes into the state tomorrow. Doesn't mean we can't amend that, but as far as we are now, or what we know now, any overtime expenses or expenses related to staffing can be included in that. The chief might have other resources as we go down and through this pandemic even further that he can submit to for overtime costs. The issue, to me right now is that even with, so what you're hearing is from the chief, because we need to come up with a solution, at least try our best to do that, is to have a checkpoint, to call people out, and certainly cite them to get their attention. We'll get as much communication out as we can that we intend to do this. It's very curious to me, and I'm sure you, as to why with such a national health crisis, people are not abiding by what they're supposed to do. But in any case, they are. And not unlike any other big city that you're hearing on the national news, not unlike our neighboring municipalities, everyone are having these issues with people not paying attention. And we can saturate the boardwalk as much as possible. That's going to lead, as the chief said, to other consequences. People aren't friendly. They're going to get their ire up, of course, and we'll deal with it. We're prepared to deal with that. But as far as, when, and the chief, I think, might have covered this, and you may know yourselves also, but, you talk to one person on Rehoboth Avenue, and then somebody else is walking by, and they're going to point out 16 other people that. So we'll do the best we can to get everything covered, but it's quite a leap of faith today and every day to try to get this under control. The governor pointed out this morning that 2 months ago it was the elderly population. Now, of course, the summertime is here, and it's the younger population. So we're trying to do a balancing act every day, and I can assure you that we have the best personnel who can handle these situations with the public as gently and graciously as we can, but we're going to have to certainly be more stern and carry out the acts that law enforcement does on a regular basis. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sharon. Before we go to Commissioner Caluzzi, as Commissioner Gay just mentioned, Carol Everhart is on the call, and she's got like 3 minutes. I think hearing from her might be important. Carol Everhart?
Carol is no longer on the call.
Yeah, I think she dropped off a few minutes ago.
Disregard that. Commissioner Caluzzi.
Thank you. One suggestion I have that might be helpful is maybe what we should do is not allow eating on the boardwalk. I mean, if you're buying something, you have to go to the beach or you have to go somewhere, because if we're getting the excuse as people are walking down the boardwalk with their mask off saying they're eating, well, that's going to be problematic. I don't know if that's a reasonable thing to try to put in place, but it's a thought.
I can give you my point of view. That may be a little tricky thought, just because there are a number of different food establishments on the boardwalk, whether it's pizza or French fries or ice cream. And that's a lot of the reason that people go to the boardwalk. So I would think, it sounds like a good idea, but I would think it might be problematic and create more problems for the chief's staff.
Okay.
Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, no.
But understand that's the problems we've been running into, because everybody's got that excuse that they're eating or they're drinking, and I keep asking them, well, put your mask up when you ready to take a drink or eat something, then while you're chewing, you can put it back up. And that's where me as an older adult can work with the public. Again, I'm not making excuses, but these younger seasonal cadets just don't have that ability at this time to get that message across, where you have somebody in the 30s or 40s, 50s yelling at them saying, I'm eating and I'll put it up when I'm done. So that's why we are seeing that difficulty to enforce. But no, I agree. I don't think that's something we should put, but we wouldn't be able to enforce it anyway. So I guess.
Okay.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Yeah, I would just like to point out, we focus on this, but the fact that the limited law, as good as they are, there's limits in what Chief Banks and his law enforcement team can do. It's no different than on the highways. If people exceed the speed limits, yeah, a small percentage gets caught, but as the police officers are citing those individuals, other speeders are going by. So that's going to happen. And we just have to recognize that. As many as can get caught will be caught. But the fact is, when you're attending to one individual, others are going to take advantage.
Yeah, thank you. A couple things, if I could say, the bad news is across the country, some of these states, Florida, Texas, a couple of the other ones, Arizona, are realizing these huge jumps in cases, and their hospitalizations are going up, and that's very bad news. The good news is some of these governors that didn't think about it a long time ago are now starting to think about it, whether they're closing beaches or they're closing restaurants or they're backing up. But they've, based upon what the governor has said, in the last couple of days. They've got some huge problems relative to ours, and that's not to say ours are a problem. But one of the things that I've seen locally is, and the governor mentioned it as well, is all of a sudden, some of these younger people are starting to take it a little bit more serious. Talking to a couple different restaurant owners, that all of a sudden they don't have staff, they've got to close for a couple days, spray it down. I talked to someone this morning that's got 2 restaurants in Rehoboth, and he's doing pretty well because he's got outside dining, but he's closing once a week and spraying down everything. And I think that's becoming the norm. And simultaneously, I think a lot of the staff in these places are starting to say, or their parents are starting to say, you know what, I don't want to come in for a few days, or I need to get tested, or maybe I'm going home. So I think the demographic that's being hit the hardest right now seems to be waking up a little bit. I don't know if that's a positive in the long run. I'm hoping it is. But it seems like an awful lot of these people and restaurant owners are starting to see the writing on the wall that they can't be open with big crowds. They've got to step back. And, you know, before their summer is completely ruined, they want to take a break and get back on track. So, I mean, I think the hope is that this may slow down. Now, young people, they tend to do what they want to do, and they go out to these bars in big crowds, or they go to party houses. But I think the fact that all of a sudden they're realizing that it gets them too, even though they're asymptomatic, you never know how it's going to affect them in the long run. And so the hope there is maybe people start to realize, even though it's been 3 or 4 months, there's some serious times in our future. Since I don't see anybody's hands up, I would suggest that we maybe start calling on some of our public people. Our first one is Rick Perry, and I see he's still on. Max?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners and members of the public. Thanks for the opportunity to have a consent period here. I really don't have very much to add. I think you've been covering an awful lot of territory, and I am, like many people, extremely concerned about the resurgence of the COVID-19, and particularly concerned about its impact on our local businesses, restaurants, and shops. I would like to add my voice in support of making masks mandatory in the commercial district. I just fail to understand the distinction between the boardwalk and Rehoboth Avenue in particular. Each is as heavily pedestrian heavy as the other. Baltimore and Wilmington and First and to some degree 2nd Street likewise. And I was listening to Dr. Fauci testifying before the Senate this morning. He made it abundantly clear without any question whatsoever that people need to wear masks. Testing and masks are the 2 most important things. He also emphasized, a very big concern that is growing, and that is in restaurant dining as one of the most perhaps dangerous places for the transmission of the COVID-19, even if you're social distancing. Again, it's an enclosed area. And so, that's something that I know a lot of our restaurant owners already, have taken under consideration, and some have voluntarily just decided to shut down their indoor dining, largely because customers are unwilling to cooperate with their staff. And they're encountering the same belligerence that our police force and other city people are encountering with the public. It's sad, unfortunately, but that's what we are faced with dealing with. But I do think we have to take every step possible to not just encourage, but to clearly communicate to everyone who is in our city that they need to wear a mask when they are in a public place, period, and that there will be consequences if they fail to do that. That's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Vaveri.
Hi. Actually, I was planning to make a comment under citizen comment, so it's not directly related to the COVID response.
Okay, we'll come back to you then.
Okay.
Jennifer Duncan.
Yes, hi. First, I want to thank our city manager, city staff, and police. I call them the front line, and hopefully don't take that out of my 3 minutes. It was sad to see this morning that we made Good Morning America national television. What I believe is that the city needs a united front. The city government, retailers, restaurants, hotels, realtors, Chamber of Commerce, and Main Street must come together and enforce the wearing of masks in all commercial areas of the city. I was in email correspondence with a very high-level official of our state, and he said the governor's state of emergency states that if 6 feet of social distancing cannot be realized, then masks are required, period. I contend that the infrastructure of our commercial area cannot comply with social distancing. Signage should be placed at the end of each sidewalk within the city commercial district that masks are required, and violators should be given a hefty fine. You know, the future of our businesses is clearly now at stake, and this is very sad for me as a lifelong Rehobothian. We cannot move forward to stage 3, and we may have to retreat to stage 1. Looking in the rearview mirror, and I'm not faulting any of you because you did your best, the idea of the red barriers to help our businesses was the wrong course to take. Cost us money, time, and contributed to our inability to move forward. The correct course is simply then and now mandatory masks and enforcement. And I would like to say there are only so many police in our city. I think this United Front group needs to be formed tomorrow. Meet this week, form a plan that can be executed so we can effectively enforce wearing masks within the individual business areas throughout the commercial districts. Chief Banks cannot do it all by himself. I would also like to add one more thing, that Chief Banks mentioned maybe getting some additional police help, but housing was an issue. Pat Caluzzi especially, the Kiwanis house is empty. Maybe they can donate it for the police for the rest of our calendar year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Tom Evans.
Thanks, Paul. After I'm done, please call on Sturgis as she's logged in, but her computer's not being recognized. Dovetailing on what Jennifer Duncan just said, remember also the state barracks building is empty on Route 1, I think, at the moment. It's not in town, but it's a close nearby place. The only thing, in summary, what I'd say is, and many of you finally are swinging in the right direction, that if we do not do something differently by this Friday for the 4th of July weekend and from there forward during the heaviest season of people and tourists in our town, then this will not go well for our businesses because we will move backwards because of an increase in COVID-19. The only two things I'll pick on, I agree completely with what Rick said and what Jennifer said. Masks are the first line of both offense and defense for COVID-19. As an epidemiologist, and I agree completely with what everybody's been saying, is if you don't ask people to wear them, then you're at least you're setting yourself up for failure. You may not convince everybody, but at least you're telling everybody it's a fair playing ground and that you are required to wear a mask or there are consequences. I certainly am sympathetic with Chief Banks. we can have police officers wherever they are. That's as uniform as we can be in enforcement. But if we don't say wear them and they're required, then some people won't wear them that might wear them otherwise. The other two problems really are the beach. Number one is this weekend, I believe, because it's been bad all the last 2 weekends, is that the beach will not be possible to social distance on. If we don't have a strategy going into this weekend and through the rest of the summer to ensure that we have the ability to have people be social distancing, an area where we do not require masks, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. Two minor things. By the way, Sharon, Lynn, they are letting tents be on the beach in Rehoboth right now and on many beaches. And if they don't want them on their beach, are sending them to beach one, just so you know. Anything else? I think not. With that, I'll give another 3 minutes to my wife, Sturgis Dodge.
Thank you. And it's good to see you all. I've missed you. You're all healthy. I wish you could see me. I look good. Anyway, and I really want to thank.
Yes, she does.
Thank. I really want to thank. Tom has a beard. I want to thank the police, and I can't imagine this. And when I listen to the police chief talk about this situation, the temperature of the nation right now. It's frightening to me. It's frightening. And you know, there's a part of my brain that says, I think the National Guard needs to be on standby or on call. And I wanted to kind of echo what Byrne was saying, is that I think if the governor is not ready, willing, and pushing us toward literally closing the beaches, which is the attractive nuisance that's creating this problem, then I think the state needs to give us the ability to support the only thing that makes sense, which is to wear the masks. And you know, this has become so politicized and so divisive and such a heated issue. You know, the idea of having sort of ambassadors promote this just seems somehow inadequate to the task. So I wish we could somehow say to the public that's coming, you know, if you don't behave, we're going to shut you out of the sandbox. You know, you won't have a playground, you know, because you'll give us no choice. So I really, you know, hope things go well. I mean, right now I heard you say, Paul, some of the things the governor's looking at that are positive are, you know, deaths are not that high, ICU's not that high, hospitalizations are not, but it's just a matter of time before testing numbers result in those things going up. So I just hope you have the best wisdom. I wish that on you, and good luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Max, I don't see Karen Howland. The next would be, okay. The next would be Gary Colangelo.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I've listened to the entire hearing, and I must say I congratulate you on doing an excellent job with a very tough issue. I've been a dentist for 50 years, but half of my time in that profession has been in public health, and in particular in improving access to care. And I was in a lot of commissions and committees and so on. And I ended up actually being involved in 4 epidemics. Typhoid fever, the measles epidemic in Baltimore in 1989, and Agent Orange. And doing a lot of what you're doing, trying to change behavior, basically, of people that are affected by these diseases. HIV and AIDS was a real learning experience for people in public health. And I was really gratifying to hear that you are the commissioners and the mayor, you're thinking the right way. A lot of these ideas of collaboration and of messaging that came out of AIDS to make the use of barriers more effective. So I just have two comments based on my experience with AIDS. I think one is in messaging, and I think one of the commissioners said this. The messaging on mask utilization has got to be consistent, and it has to be clear, and it has to be repeated over and over and come from different venues. Can't just be coming from City Hall. It's got to come from the realtors, the business people, the citizens of Rehoboth Beach. And in that messaging, it's not just wearing masks. They have to be worn properly. It does no good to have a mask hanging from one ear or around your neck. That defeats the purpose of it. So that messaging needs to include to the effect that the mask must cover your nose and your mouth. The other comment, and Jennifer Duncan, I think, actually said this very well, and this comes straight from my my work with HIV/AIDS. You need to broaden the culture of caring. We need to get, when I say caring, I don't mean just caring for each other. I mean caring about the community, caring about the issue of COVID-19. And there are very powerful incentives of doing that, of broadening the culture of caring. The incentives being that Rehoboth Beach could be shut down if this problem does not come under control. That will be a horrible loss to business people, to owners, to citizens. I have a property for 30 years in Rehoboth Beach, and I am not looking forward to shutting down that beach in the middle of the summer. But following up on Jennifer Duncan's idea and broadening the people who are caring about this issue, that we need to involve businesses. They may have some good ideas. As citizens may have some good ideas about how to implement an understanding, particularly in young people, why this is important, and change their culture. My property is a rental property, and I told my agent that if my tenant gets a citation for not wearing a mask, they're out of there. They're evicted, and we can do that. If they do dangerous activity or illegal activity, we can throw them out of the house. But that's just a threat that could be used. So an idea that I had was that hotels and rental agents will have a document that each tenant or each hotel guest signs, and it will say that they will comply with wearing the mask, and they will keep that document with them. And in that document, the consequences of not wearing a mask will be spelled out. I mean, that was just one idea of involving the business community in the work that you're doing, rather than you having to carry all the weight yourself. I'm sure there are other ideas. I certainly would support having a coalition or a work group come together with representatives from the chamber. It would be a great activity for Main Street. to organize. I think we could also involve citizen input into this. You know, the AIDS task force that I was on only met 2 times, and we came up with some ideas that actually worked, that actually gained compliance of people who are at risk for getting AIDS, mainly younger people. So I would really like to see that happen, and happen soon, happen quickly. And I would like to be involved in that some way. It may be a way to, as I said, to broaden the burden of caring about this issue and to come up with some ideas, particularly in messaging, that come from different quarters rather than just coming from City Hall.
Mr. Colangelo, would you mind if I stop you there? We typically have 3 to 4 minutes.
Sure.
And if you have anything else to say.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your comment.
Excellent.
I'm going to go right to the city manager, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So what I would recommend to the mayor and commissioners is that the mayor adds an amendment to his state of emergency, which is already in place here, declaring that everyone on any public street in any commercial establishment on the beach, on the boardwalk, wear a mask. And if you don't want to do it on the beach, then it goes to a clear message, one message. There won't be any question as to where a mask is required or not. And if we can get this into effect by tomorrow, we can have press on it. It will be out there for the weekend, and the chief and the officers will hopefully have some better cooperation from people out there that aren't wearing masks. So we'll get the signage up as much as possible. I certainly can't promise it's going to be on every street end, but we've been talking and working on this for a couple of days now. We'll get as much out there as possible. It's already up, Commissioner Schlosser, on the marquee. We changed that yesterday. Masks required. And I think with the state of emergency, making a stronger message from Mayor Coons that hopefully we can have much more compliance. It's not going to be total, of course, but I think it'll certainly help.
I'm sorry, Sharon, can I just ask Sharon, I didn't hear her very well right there. Did you say required on the commercial, on Rehoboth Avenue, the boardwalk, and the beach?
I did. All commercial street, all public streets, and commercial establishments on the boardwalk. The beach, if you want. I mean, that's up to you. But we don't have social distancing, so that's an issue. But I think with a stronger message from the state of emergency that we can get cooperation here. That's my recommendation.
And you didn't say the beach, right? You didn't say mandatory on the beach, right?
I think there needs to be one statement in the amendment to the declaration. If you don't want to do the beach, you don't want to do the beach, but that's a statement that needs to be made. That in the city of Rehoboth Beach, if you're here within the confines of the city limits, you must wear a mask when you're on a public street. It includes the boardwalk, it includes retail establishments, and I mean restaurants where indicated. But I think Glenn and I can work on that as we get into the evening here.
So, and Sharon, just as a process note, we don't have to, if this is part of the state of emergency, you just need a consensus for us to do it, right? It's not something we have to have a motion about or vote on, right? because it's part of the state.
No. I mean, the mayor can certainly do it without you, but I mean, you're on the call right now, so I thought it would be best to get some kind of consensus.
Good point.
Just again, to make some kind of clear determination that can go out to the press, that we can flood social media with, that says, unlike other places, by the way, the governor, is a little, his message is clear, but, there's questions about it. So we just make that one statement that says, in the city of Rehoboth Beach, masks are required, and we can go into the detail. And that way we get it out in the press, and everyone hears that.
And you do a code red too?
Certainly, we can do a code red, yes.
I think it's, okay.
Sharon, if I can interrupt, one of the things in the governor's announcement last week, when he put off phase 3, he basically said in his announcement, you're required to wear a mask in public settings.
Yeah.
Period. So that kind of goes to Jennifer Duncan's standpoint, is basically he's saying if you're in the public, you have to wear it. I know he's said a number of times, if you can't social distancing, you have to wear it. Now, going down the list, just so we're all clear before we get off here on this, is you're saying requirement of a mask on the boardwalk. You're requiring it in business establishments, whether retail or restaurants. You said on public streets. Does that mean in the neighborhoods or just the commercial streets? And then you said,
yeah, go ahead.
And then you said, we have to make the decision on the beach, but your suggestion is on the beach as well. A clear statement across the board.
Well, that's my suggestion. That's my recommendation. I mean, that's certainly up to you, but with all these beaches closing in other areas, that's part of the problem. I mean, we're saying that masks are going to deter the spread of the virus. And if you're on the beach and you want to take advantage of that, and you can't because you're in Rehoboth Beach and there's only 1 mile of beach, and there's too many people here because for whatever reason, they want to get out. I understand that, but there's still one blanket, one towel on top of each other. So there's just no room in the city to expand.
I agree with that. Okay, so
a practical situation though is, what about people who are swimming? What about into the water and out of the water and that whole kind of a thing? I mean, obviously we're not expecting somebody to wear a mask in the water.
No, I'm not expecting that. But again, I'm trying to make some kind of clear statement that is simple, that says masks are required in Rehoboth Beach. And like I said, Glenn and I can work on the language there and get it out so we have press on it before the weekend, in advance of that. It's not that it's unprecedented, but it's certainly different than what's already out there. So the governor's message is fine, and certainly covers the entire state, but I think we can go a step ahead and bring that into the city of Rehoboth Beach.
And I agree, Sharon. However, are we saying any public street? So in the neighborhood, you're walking down the street with your dog, you have to have a mask on, regardless if people are around.
That's what I would recommend, but again, that's up to you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Yep. No. I just wanted to make sure everybody hears that. Commissioner Schlosser.
I'm fine with one consistent message.
Commissioner Schlosser, you had your hand up?
I'm conflicted on that beach, on the beach, because of what Commissioner Clusie said. And, what about swimming? What about, the fact that we haven't run that particular thing by, our community, by others? So I'm not sure on that, but I just think that needs a little more discussion on the beach itself. On public streets, I think that's probably okay, I suppose. But I also wanted to ask the question, and Sharon, I think you said you'll probably address this, but if we make it mandatory in all business establishments, the way the restaurants are working is you have to wear it in to the restaurant, but once you sit down, you can take it off, obviously, because you have to eat. So, I mean, you'd work that. Are you saying you'd work things like that out with Glenn to make sure those exceptions are incorporated? That's just an example. Or
yes, and maybe don't even mention the restaurants, because there's already, clear, I think, clearer messaging out there. But I mean, we'll figure it out. Restaurants can continue with, what they're advancing now and saying, and the restaurants aren't the issue, as we said. I mean, you're going to have issues with people that are, walking by the outdoor dining that we've permitted. That's the biggest problem that I've heard. People are walking by, and then somebody else says they weren't wearing a mask. Well, I think if you make masks mandatory and you state that, although they already are when you can't social distance, that's the issue that is very confusing to people. So when the message was up on the marquee earlier, people were advising the chief and his personnel that you can't tell me that a mask is required, because they're saying that they're social distanced. Well, they're not. I mean, it's just not realistic in the city of Rehoboth Beach in June, July, and August to social distance. The streets are packed, boardwalk's packed, and so is the beach.
Right. And also, I think that there's been a little bit of a confusion about what social distancing means. I've been looking at this recently that, people seem to think it's strangers. And it's not just strangers. It's anyone who's not in your household, anyone you haven't been living with for the past, months. And so because we have a lot of groups, I mean, this is what happened with the lifeguards, right? I mean, because you have a lot of people living in groups in the summer that aren't related. I mean, I've seen a couple pictures just in the last few days of friends hanging out in Rehoboth having fun, and that's great, but they're actually supposed to be distancing. It's not just from strangers. And I don't, I think that's hard to do when you're vacationing. So I don't know how we communicate that, but that is what it means.
Well, again, Mayor and Commissioners, I'm just making a recommendation. I think if you get some kind of clear statement out there that puts us ahead of the curve, maybe there'll be more compliance with the mask wearing.
I tend to agree that we have to put something out if the city manager and the solicitor can work on some kind of language, because I think we have to throw it out there that masks are required.
And we can't split hairs.
Right.
Because otherwise, if it's not required here, why is it required there? And why is it required there? And I understand the situation about swimming, but social distancing on the beach, a mask should be required, just like on the boardwalk, just like on Rehoboth Avenue. And I know, people sit with their family sometimes, social distancing, but as Commissioner Gay mentions, most of the time, the people sitting around on towels don't necessarily come from the same family. They may be in the same house this week, but next week they're going to be in 3 different houses.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's really physical distancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm fine with moving ahead with a simple, straightforward statement saying masks are required in Rehoboth Beach. If you don't have one, you risk a hefty fine. And I think that's important, and we should move forward with it. That would be mine.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I certainly support that.
Commissioner Szymanski, I haven't heard from you, or Gay.
Well, I've said it several times today. Absolutely, I support that. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Commissioner Schlosser?
I can live with it. I think we need to try something. I defer to the city manager's recommendation.
Yep. Okay. So the solicitor and the city manager will put together some kind of language. Obviously work it out with the chief. Anything further?
Just exercising too, Sharon. I think that people do need a little latitude when they're running or biking or working out on the beach or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
So
but
I do think some latitude's required there. Should be allowed there.
I don't know. I see people running wearing masks. I see people riding bikes wearing masks.
Yeah.
I think we can't split hairs on this.
I disagree on that. You cannot work out doing it.
Then you open the door a crack and people will drive a Mack truck through it.
Well,
True. Plus, if they're running, they're
open acres.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the argument of what's running, what's jogging, what's fast walking.
Hey, I'm not trying to be.
I hear you, Lisa, but it just opens a crack.
Yeah.
You could be
walking for our police.
You could be walking and say, "Oh no,
you can't
running now."
You can't wear a mask doing high intensity training on the beach. I mean, you just can't.
I think we just need to be consistent, and it's going to be a difficult enforce anyway, but I think the statement needs to be out in front, and I think we'll accomplish what we can accomplish.
I agree, and I mean the chief and his staff are going to use discretion,
Absolutely.
and we have to trust that the discretion they're using is appropriate. Question for Glenn: I think the commissioners need to ratify any amendments to the emergency proclamation. Is that right?
So I
think so.
The emergency operations plan does provide for, it does reference that the commissioners should have some role in ratifying those things. I think though today's consensus, or at least, I mean, you could take a vote today to authorize the mayor to implement the second modification to his emergency proclamation consistent with what's been discussed today. And then that would be done. Take care of it.
I'd say let's just do that so it's done. So I'll move to allow the mayor to amend, make a third amendment to the emergency proclamation to make mandatory face masks in all public areas within Rehoboth Beach, as with language written by the city solicitor.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to make a third amendment on the state of emergency and making mandatory face mask wearing in the city as stated by the city manager before, as a statement drawn up by the solicitor. Any further discussion?
Do we have an effective date? Is it tomorrow? Is it Friday?
Sharon?
It'll be hopefully tomorrow when we can get it out, and there'll be a time on it, 5 o'clock Wednesday, July 1. The sooner the better, I think, so it's out there for the public to see for the weekend.
Right. Okay.
Mayor, I'll amend my motion to include an effective date of June 31st.
No, July 1st.
I'm sorry.
And the seconder accepts that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. In addition to what we just went over, it would be effective July 1st, 5 p.m. Any further discussion? If not, Commissioner Byrne.
Aye.
Commissioner Gay.
Aye.
Commissioner Sheffer.
Aye.
Commissioner Schwazowski.
Aye.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaluzzi.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Motion carries. Now, before we go forward, I know we've got a citizen comment that wants to make a comment. We had skipped a week. Do we want to go back to next Tuesday for a meeting again, or do you want to just skip a week as we did before?
I think we better go back because I think this is a really the tipping point someone mentioned. I do believe it is a tipping point. I think we'd better assess again on Tuesday, coming Tuesday.
I agree with that.
I agree. And Ann, I know you're on the call here. If you can get the agenda together. I know it's a rush for next Tuesday. Thank you. Same time, 3 o'clock, I would imagine.
Yeah, but before we leave this topic altogether, I do have one question that was asked me by a citizen. My understanding, I guess, is that the tot lots are not going to open until phase 3. Was that the plan?
That's the state's plan as well.
Because I thought so, but then they reminded me that they're open in Lewis, so I just didn't know. Some of the state plans, in fact, some of the things on our own framework for phase 3 are no longer applicable. If you look at our original framework for phase 3, it seems rather quaint now. It says that that's when the beach and boardwalk were going to open. So I just kind of wonder in all this, especially with social distancing, especially with the beach as crowded as it is, and especially with outside activity and fresh air being seen as a good thing. I just wonder, if it's probably an area that would be less crowded than the beach.
Well,
we're gonna,
as far as
just a point on this,
came up from to the governor today on the mayor's call, and he basically said until phase 3, the playgrounds are closed.
Okay, I'll tell him that. Okay.
And I would just add, Mayor and Commissioners, that although our playgrounds are closed, there are children playing on the playgrounds with their parents right there. We've gone up to the individuals, and they've told us in no uncertain terms that they're not leaving.
Yep. All right. We've got one
wonderful parental model.
Yeah, really.
And you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to know if you'd like to use the same language in the agenda for next week.
Yes.
Okay. I'll go ahead. Ready.
Thank you very much, Ann. We're going to go to Bruce Vivari. I know you had a citizen comment.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments may run 3 minutes and 15 seconds, if that's okay with you.
That's it. That's all I'm going to allow.
Oh.
You said it. I didn't.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for allowing me to address you today. I just want to take this opportunity to follow up on a complaint that I had filed with you earlier this month. There's a lot of history associated with the renovations and allowable use of the accessory building located at 17 Lake Avenue, and I won't go into all that here today. Just suffice it to say that the city was a defendant during a 3-day trial held back in 1991, where Judge Hartnett ruled that the accessory building was not a lawfully existing, non-conforming use or structure. The judge also ordered the removal of the 3rd floor bathroom fixtures and prohibited any residential use of the 3rd floor. When Ms. Curl purchased the property in 2012, she would have been aware of these restrictions because the court's judgment is recorded in the Sussex County land records. After I noticed activity on the 3rd floor in the building back in October of 2019, I asked Dennis Jenny from your Permits and Licensing Office to inspect the 3rd floor of the accessory house to determine if it was being used in accordance with the court's order. He found that the bathroom fixtures had indeed been reconnected without first obtaining any required building permits, and that the 3rd floor bedroom and bathroom were being used for residential purposes, both of which are in violation of the court's order. When I asked Sharon Lynn to keep me apprised of this case as it moved forward, she refused to do so, and when I replied that I would need to file FOI, Freedom of Information requests to obtain any information. Thus, I have filed FOIA requests on 4 separate occasions. While city officials finally did allow me to review the building permits file, they have ignored or refused my other requests, which is a violation of the city's and state's own FOIA policies. On May 14th, I contacted Mr. Jenny via email and asked what violations and fines had been issued to Ms. Curl in this matter. He replied, none, and that Ms. Curl's actions were done unwittingly, and that the bathroom fixtures have yet to be removed. To summarize, the city's own ordinances authorize city officials to issue notices of violation and impose fines for such violations, yet no such actions have been taken. The plumbing fixtures were reconnected with no building permit. The 3rd floor apartment is still being used in violation of the court's order, and the business rental license application probably misrepresent the number of bedrooms allowed to be rented. I understand city officials need to have some discretion in how to do their job, but the question for you to investigate is, why is Ms. Curl receiving such unusually special lenient treatment from city officials? Or are all violators treated this way? Lastly, and worst of all, and why I accelerated this, I looked at the city's online permits and inspection website on June 19th and discovered the inspection history records for 17 Lake that were on the website early this year have been removed. Everything has been erased. So city officials are now also tampering with and destroying public records in an effort to cover their tracks. I have to say I'm really discouraged by the city's administration handling of this matter to date. I believe in good governance and following the rules. When I wanted to remove a tree on my property, I danced your dance by your rules. I worked for the Parks and Shade Tree Commission. I paid all the fees. I complied with all your rules. And yet here we have Ms. Curl, who violates the city ordinances and zoning laws, and even court orders without repercussion. I wish I had such a free ride. I can only hope that you take this matter seriously. My efforts to track this case have been met with stonewalling and little effort to comply with my FOIA requests. We citizens can only wonder what else is going on behind closed doors at City Hall to benefit the privileged few. Whoever deleted the inspection records crossed a serious red line and should be officially reprimanded or terminated from their position. And please don't accept the standard response I've been getting so far, which is it was done unwittingly. If you allow this conduct to continue unabated, it just makes you, Mr. Mayor, and your fellow commissioners and everyone else in the city administration just look bad. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, sir. We'll look into it. Anything else before Commissioner Schlosser?
Yes, Mayor, I just wanted to clarify a couple things that folks have been sending on the thing, the mask wearing, just very quickly. One, are we saying that there's going to be some flexibility with people going into the water and swimming? Like, do they still have to wear a mask? I just want to understand that real quick, because you're going to get asked 100 questions from all over if we don't clarify that question. So is that going to be something where there's some flexibility from the enforcement? I just think we have to answer that question, in terms of, and then I have one more question of that. So I just, Mayor, you can explain it, or Sharon, or whoever else wants to, but I really kind of want to understand that question, because I think there'll be a lot of questions about it. The answer to that question.
My suggestion, and I'll let Sharon say something, whatever.
Yeah.
My suggestion is when you're on the beach, a mask is required. If you're in the water, that's not part of the order.
I agree with you, Mayor. I hope that's.
But I think we have to be consistent with on the beach. I did not hear anybody say on the beach, in the water, whatever. But I understand what you're saying. It would be very difficult to force the issue in the water, but I'll open that back to the city manager.
I think your statement, Mayor, is spot on, and we'll make sure that appears in the modification.
Thank you.
Makes good sense.
Yeah.
And Lisa, did you have something else you said?
I did, Mayor. Just a quick clarification on the governor's order. Hopefully, I know it just came out. So on closing of the bars, that does not apply to serving alcohol in outdoor seating for the restaurants, or if there's outdoor.
No, it's not closing the establishments.
Yeah, I just want to understand.
It's going back to phase one, which if you look at phase one, they did not allow anybody to be sitting in the bar area, sitting at the bar or standing in the bar area. You can have a bartender serving drinks. You can be sitting at tables in the bar area as long as it goes within the 60%. But the bars, you can't be standing around. Outside is as it's always been.
Okay. Okay, so the only change in this or the interpretation is you can't go sit at a bar and drink, right?
Exactly.
Okay, gotcha. Okay,
Or
thank you.
stand. You can't stand either.
Or sit or stand at an indoor bar.
Even an outdoor bar, can
Well,
Even an outdoor bar.
actual bars will be closed.
Yeah, the bars, as far as using it as a bar, as a drinking spot,
yeah,
are closed.
Even outdoors, though.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be closed to
Okay.
patrons.
And we don't have any that are just pure bars. So we won't have any that are going to have to be closed because of that.
Exactly.
A few establishments where you can go to a bar area, order a drink, and then take it to your table.
Can't do that.
Yeah.
That's against the law.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to clarify that point.
But that's the case. Even normally, you can't go to the bar and go to a table unless you're seated by the people in the restaurant.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Going once? Okay. Thank you very much. You all have a nice evening.
Yep, you too.
You too.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good 4th.